I had no idea what I was getting into. Those words echoed in my mind as I stared at the contract in front of me. It seemed like just another routine audit. Luca Vitti, a name I'd heard in business circles, a powerful CEO, nothing I couldn't handle. But what I didn't know was that this audit would change everything. My job was to check the books, but as I sifted through the financial documents, something didn't add up. There were discrepancies, large sums of money that didn't belong. I felt it, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I glanced up and saw him, Luca Vitti, standing in the doorway, his dark eyes locked on mine. My heart skipped a beat. His presence was suffocating. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, and his cold, calculating gaze seemed to pierce straight through me. "I see you found something," he said, his voice calm, but with an underlying tension that made my blood run cold. I swallowed hard. How much did he know? How much did I really know? His lips twitched into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He stepped into the room, his shoes clicking on the marble floor like a ticking clock, counting down to something I wasn't ready for. "You're very thorough," he continued, walking slowly towards me. I felt cornered, but I didn't move. "What exactly are you looking for?" He stopped just a few feet away, his gaze never leaving mine. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but my mouth went dry. I was just doing my job, wasn't I? But there was something in his eyes, something that told me this was no ordinary job. "The thing is," Lucas said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial, "some secrets are best left undiscovered." My breath caught in my throat. I felt like a deer caught in headlights. What had I stumbled upon? And why was I suddenly so afraid of the man standing in front of me? His gaze never wavered, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it amusement? Or something darker? I couldn't tell. "You're not leaving until we talk," he added, his words more of a command than a suggestion. I forced myself to take a step back, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. For sure, this wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about something much bigger, and I was trapped in the middle of it. I tried to step back, but Luca's presence was suffocating. I couldn't focus on the papers in front of me anymore. His eyes held me captive. "You look confused," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. I couldn't decide if I was terrified or intrigued. "You're just doing your job, aren't you?" he added, as if reading my mind. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was doing anymore. My hands trembled slightly as I forced myself to maintain composure. "You have every right to be confused," Luca continued, his voice now just above a whisper. "But some things are better left alone, Sophia." He used my name with a casual authority, as if we'd known each other for years. I tried to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine at the sound of it. I wasn't sure why, but it made me feel even more trapped, like I was a part of something much bigger than I'd ever imagined. "You're not the first to stumble across something like this," he said, taking a few steps closer. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. Every step he took felt like it was pulling me deeper into a world I didn't belong in. "But you're different. You've got that drive, that focus." He paused and looked at me with a strange mixture of admiration and something darker. "It's why I chose you for this job." I didn't know whether to be flattered or alarmed. Luca wasn't like any CEO I'd ever met. He wasn't just a businessman. There was something dangerous about him, something I couldn't quite place. "What are you saying?" I asked, finally gathering the courage to speak. "You didn't come here just to check numbers," he replied, his voice low. "You came because you're looking for something. Something bigger than the numbers." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was he right? Had I really come here just for the audit? Or had there been something pulling me into this from the start? "I've seen it before," Luca continued, his voice now colder. "People get curious, start digging where they shouldn't. They find out too much, and then it's too late. You can't walk away from this once you've seen what's really going on." I swallowed hard, trying to push the growing sense of dread out of my mind. "I'm just here to do my job," I repeated, almost like a mantra. "And I'll finish it." Luca smiled, a thin, knowing smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know you will," he said, "but you'll never leave the way you came in." The words hung in the air like a warning. My heart raced. What was he trying to tell me? What was he hiding? I looked at the papers in front of me again, trying to focus, but the numbers all blurred together. I could feel Luca's presence behind me, watching, waiting. What had I uncovered? And why did I feel like I had just crossed a line that couldn't be undone? The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about Luca's words. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his cold gaze, his voice echoing in my mind. You'll never leave the way you came in. It felt like a warning, but it also felt like a promise. A promise that my life had just shifted in a direction I wasn't ready for. I tried to focus on my work, but every document I reviewed only led me to more questions. Where was the money going? Who were the real players behind Luca's empire? The deeper I dug, the more it seemed like I had entered a world that was far beyond me. One night, as I stayed late in the office, trying to make sense of the numbers, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Luca. I see you've been working hard. You're making progress. My heart skipped a beat. How did he know I was still going through everything? My mind raced. Was he tracking me? The message continued. I think you should come by the office tomorrow. We need to talk. I hesitated before replying, but eventually typed back, what about? The response was quick. You'll understand soon enough. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. It was unsettling. The next day, I walked into his office. Luca was sitting behind his desk, his eyes never leaving me as I entered. Sophia, you've done well, he said, gesturing for me to sit. But now, I think it's time you knew the truth. All of it. His words hung in the air like a weight. I felt my stomach churn, but I couldn't stop myself from asking, what truth? Luca leaned forward, his gaze intense. You've uncovered more than just financial discrepancies. You've uncovered the very foundation of everything I've built. He paused, letting the words settle in. And I think you're starting to realize that the life you know, the life you've lived, will never be the same once you know everything. I felt the blood drain from my face. What was he saying? What had I really uncovered? Luca stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. I'm not just a businessman, Sophia. I'm part of something much bigger. Something that has power in places you couldn't even begin to understand. And now, you're a part of it too. The realization hit me like a freight train. Everything had changed. My job, my life, my future, they were all connected to Luca now. I had no idea where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back. Luca's words echoed in my mind as I walked out of his office. You're a part of it now. The weight of what he said settled in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in way over my head. For days, I tried to act normal, but it was impossible. Every document I reviewed felt like it had layers I couldn't unravel. And every time I thought I was getting closer to the truth, there was another wall, another question that led me deeper into a world I couldn't comprehend. My phone buzzed late one night, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw it was Luca. We need to talk, it said. Come to the building tomorrow at noon. I hesitated, but I had no choice. I couldn't just walk away. The next day, I walked into the lobby of the building, feeling the weight of the decision I was making. The receptionist gave me a small smile as I walked past, like she knew exactly where I was headed. I took the elevator up to Luca's floor, and as the doors opened, I was met by one of his men, who nodded and motioned for me to follow him. Luca was already there, sitting behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand. His eyes watching me carefully as I entered. Sophia, I'm glad you came, he said, his voice as smooth as ever. We have a lot to discuss. I stood there, not sure what to expect. Luca gestured to the chair in front of him. Sit down. You've earned this conversation. I slowly sat down, trying to keep my composure. Luca leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as if he was deciding something in his mind. You've uncovered more than just financials, haven't you? You've seen the connections, the network. You've realized that this isn't just a business. It's a web that spreads far beyond anything you've ever known. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. How did he know exactly what I was thinking? How much had he been watching me? Luca took a sip of his drink, seemingly amused by my silence. You're smart, Sophia. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. He paused, letting the silence stretch between us. But here's the thing, you're not leaving this. Not now, not after what you've seen. His words hung in the air, and for the first time, I understood the full weight of his power. I was trapped. But why me? I finally managed to ask. Luca's smile was cold, calculating. Because you're different. You have the skills, the determination. You're exactly what I need. I felt a chill run down my spine. What had I gotten myself into? Luca leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. And now that you know the truth, you're either with us, or you're against us. There's no middle ground anymore. I swallowed hard. There was no turning back. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how deep I'd fallen into this world, or if I would ever be able to get out. Luca's words were a heavy weight on my chest as I sat across from him. The air between us felt thick, charged with something I couldn't quite understand. "There's no turning back now," he said, his voice low but firm. I wanted to argue, to stand up and walk out, but something stopped me. A mix of fear and curiosity. I had no idea what was happening to me, but I knew one thing. My life had already been changed. "You're here because you belong here," Luca continued, his eyes studying me like a puzzle he was piecing together. "This world, this empire, it's not just business. It's power, and you're going to help me protect it." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Was this really happening? Could I really be a part of whatever he was asking me to do? I looked down at my hands, my palms starting to sweat. I had to admit it, I was terrified, but I was also intrigued. The world Lucas spoke of was dangerous, but it was also thrilling. I couldn't deny that the allure of his power was like a magnet pulling me in. "I don't know what you expect from me," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not like you." Luca leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. "You think you're not like me?" he asked with a small smirk. "You've been looking for something, haven't you? Something more than the life you have now." I didn't know how to respond. He was right. I had always felt like there was something missing, something that just didn't fit in my ordinary life. But this was a whole new level of dangerous. "I never asked for this," I said, my voice shaky, trying to convince myself as much as him. "I just wanted to do my job." Luca's expression softened slightly, but the intensity in his eyes remained. "You think you can walk away now? You've already seen too much. You're already involved." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. I had already seen things, heard things, that I shouldn't have, and now there was no way out. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I couldn't ignore the pull, the way my body reacted to his presence. It wasn't just about business. It was about something deeper, something dangerous. Lucas stood up and walked around the desk, his steps measured, his every move commanding attention. "You'll help me, Sophia," he said, stopping in front of me. "And together, we'll protect what's ours. There's no other option." I met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. Could I do this? Could I really walk down this path with him? "I'll do whatever it takes," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Lucas smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "Good. Then let's get to work." And in that moment, I knew that my life, everything I thought I knew, was about to change forever. Lucas' office became my new reality. Every day, I was entrenched deeper in his world. What once seemed like an ordinary audit now felt like a silent partnership. The financial records, the meetings, the quiet conversations in the halls, all of it was a web, and I was tangled in it. My life had become a blend of numbers and silent promises, and I found myself doing things I never thought I would. I was helping Luca, no matter how much I told myself I was only trying to finish my job. The line between what I was doing and what he was asking of me blurred more every day. One afternoon, Luca invited me to his private office again. The urgency in his voice echoed in my mind as I walked toward the building. I had no idea what to expect, but the feeling of being watched, of constantly being on edge, had become my new normal. The moment I entered his office, I could feel the tension in the air. Luca was sitting at his desk, but he didn't immediately speak. He just stared at the papers in front of him, his brow furrowed as if deep in thought. I waited, unsure of how to approach him, but his gaze lifted, and he motioned for me to sit. "Sophia," he said quietly, "you're doing well, but there's something we need to discuss." I felt a knot form in my stomach. His tone was serious, and for the first time, I felt a real sense of fear, not for myself, but for what was coming. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Luca's eyes locked with mine, and he didn't blink. "You've seen how we operate. The connections we have, people trust us, and that's power. But there's a risk. You've uncovered something you weren't meant to see, something bigger than you realize." My heart raced. What could be bigger than what I had already found? Luca's expression softened slightly, but his next words were sharp, calculated. "I need you to make a choice, Sophia. You've already crossed a line. Now, you need to decide where you stand. There's no going back from this point." I didn't know what to say. The weight of his words was suffocating, and I could feel the world shifting around me. I was already in too deep, yet something inside me wanted to push forward. I've been doing my job, I whispered, almost as if I were trying to convince myself. But it's not just about the job anymore, Luca replied, leaning forward. This is about loyalty. About being a part of something that's bigger than anything you've ever known. You're here because I need you. But the question is, do you want to be a part of this? Do you want to stay? The room felt too small, too heavy with the decisions hanging in the air. My mind was spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. Luca had made it clear that I wasn't just an observer anymore. I had crossed a threshold. I was involved, and there was no going back. The question wasn't whether I wanted to leave. It was whether I could live with the consequences of staying. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. What happens if I stay? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear swirling inside me. Luca's lips curled into a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Then you'll be with me, and you'll learn everything. Luca's smile lingered in the air as I processed his words. Then you'll be with me, and you'll learn everything. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew it wasn't just an invitation. It was a statement of fact. A part of me wanted to run, to throw everything away and escape before it was too late. But the other part, the part that had been quietly drawn to him from the moment we first met, couldn't bring myself to leave. The world I had stepped into was too captivating, too dangerous, and I couldn't deny the pull it had on me. Days passed, and my routine became more entwined with Luca's world. I spent more time at his office, organizing files, attending meetings, learning about the empire he had built. The more I saw, the more I realized that everything I thought I knew about business, power, and loyalty was wrong. Luca was not just a CEO. He was a force that controlled everything around him with a calm intensity. He rarely spoke about his past, but the more time I spent with him, the more I could sense the weight of the decisions he had made. Every choice he had ever made, every sacrifice, was a step toward protecting this empire. But at what cost? One afternoon, Luca asked me to join him for a meeting with some of his closest associates. I wasn't sure why I was invited, but he had made it clear that I was no longer just an outsider. Come with me, he said as he grabbed his coat. His words were simple, but there was something in his tone that made me feel like I had no choice. I followed him into the elevator, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. The meeting was held in a sleek, modern conference room on the top floor of a high-rise building. As we entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to Luca. I took a seat in the back, feeling small and out of place among these powerful figures. The conversation started off like any other business meeting, but as it progressed, I realized that the stakes were much higher than I had thought. Luca was negotiating a deal, but it wasn't just about money or power, it was about control. Control over people's lives, over entire industries, and over every aspect of the world around him. I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. These were the people who made decisions that affected the very foundation of society, and here I was, sitting in the middle of it. As the meeting went on, Luca's gaze flickered to me once or twice, his eyes searching, analyzing. I could feel the weight of his attention, and it was both comforting and unsettling. After the meeting, Luca pulled me aside. You're learning quickly, he said, his voice low. You're starting to understand how everything works. I nodded, unsure of what to say. There's one thing you need to remember, Sophia, he continued. In this world, there's no such thing as neutrality. You're either with us, or you're against us. And right now, you're with us. His words sank deep, like a stone thrown into a pond, causing ripples of realization. I had made my choice, whether I was ready for it or not. There was no turning back now. I was in this world, and the deeper I went, the harder it would be to escape. But part of me didn't want to escape. I had already begun to crave the power, the control, the certainty that came with being a part of something so much bigger than myself. Luca's world had completely engulfed me. I had gone from being a simple auditor to someone entrenched in a world of power and secrets I hadn't even known existed. Every move I made now felt like it was guided by invisible strings, pulling me deeper into a game I barely understood. Yet, I couldn't stop. The power, the allure, the control, it was intoxicating. I had crossed a line I didn't even realize was there, and there was no going back. But that was the strange part. A part of me didn't want to go back. One evening, as I sat in my small office, the door to Luca's office opened, and he walked in without knocking. His presence alone made the air feel thicker. Sophia, he said, his voice as calm as ever. But there was something more behind it now. You're not just learning about the business anymore. You're becoming a part of it. His words were heavy, like a statement of truth, and they made my pulse quicken. I looked up at him, trying to read his expression. What does that mean? I asked, my voice betraying my curiosity. He walked over to the window, his back to me as he gazed out at the city skyline. It means you're more involved than you think. You've seen what we've built here, the empire. Now it's time for you to help protect it. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real, and I was being pulled into something I didn't fully understand. How? I asked, not sure if I really wanted to know the answer. Luca turned slowly, his eyes locked onto mine. You've been working with numbers. But now, it's time for you to understand the people. The ones who hold power, the ones who threaten it. And you'll be the one who makes sure they don't get too close. I felt the weight of his gaze, the pressure building. You want me to become involved in what? My voice was almost a whisper. Luca's smile was cold, but there was something in it that made my heart race. You've been here long enough to know that our world doesn't work with just numbers. It works with people. And sometimes, the only way to protect what you've built is by making sure the right people stay loyal. I stared at him, the realization hitting me hard. Loyalty wasn't just a word. It was the key to everything. And that loyalty came with a price. You're asking me to take sides, I said, my voice barely audible. Luca's smile grew slightly wider, and he stepped closer to me. Not just take sides. You'll be one of the ones who ensures the right side wins. The silence that followed his words hung heavily in the room. I could feel my pulse quicken again, and a part of me wanted to run, to find a way out. But the other part, the part that had grown accustomed to this life, to Luca's world, was already planning its next move. What do you need me to do? I finally asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Luca's eyes glinted with something I couldn't quite place. You'll know soon enough, he replied. And just like that, I knew there was no turning back. I was already a part of this world, and now, I would have to play the game, whether I was ready or not. Luca's request weighed heavily on my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, and I was right. The following days blurred together. I was deeper into the business than I'd ever imagined, and the more I saw, the less I understood. Meetings became less about numbers and more about people. Power, loyalty, and threats loomed over every decision. Every interaction felt like a test, a constant reminder that I was part of something I couldn't control. I spent hours in his office, sorting through files, listening to strategies, and working closely with Luca and his inner circle. Each day, I felt myself being pulled further into his world. It was all about connections, loyalty, and trust. I had learned that, but what I hadn't expected was how much it would cost. The cost wasn't just measured in money or power. It was measured in who you were willing to protect and who you were willing to sacrifice. One afternoon, Luca called me into his office. He wasn't alone this time. His closest associates were with him, sitting around the sleek conference table. They all looked up when I entered, their faces unreadable. I took a seat next to Luca, feeling the weight of their gazes on me. Sophia, Luca began, his voice calm, yet there was an edge to it. You've been doing well, but it's time for you to learn the true depth of what we do here. I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. What do you mean? I asked, unsure of what he was about to reveal. Luca glanced at his associates, who nodded, signaling that it was time. He turned back to me. This isn't just about business. It's about protection. Protecting what we've built and making sure no one threatens it. There are people who would do anything to destroy what we have. People who think they can tear this empire down from the inside. He paused, and I could see the tension in the room. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Luca looked at me, his expression unreadable. We need you to make sure the loyalty stays strong. There's a test coming, and you need to be ready. My heart raced. What kind of test was he talking about? What was the cost of loyalty? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't back out now. I was already too deep. You'll be a part of this, Sophia, Luca continued. You'll see the strength of what we've built, and you'll understand that there's no place for weakness here. If you can't handle that, you're out. But if you're with us, you're in for life. His words sent a chill down my spine. I had never been more aware of the weight of the decision I had made. There was no turning back. I was already in this world, and the consequences of leaving were too great. I had to stay. I had to prove my loyalty, even if I didn't fully understand what it meant. I'm with you, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Luca's lips curled into a smile, but it was cold, calculating. Good. Then let's get to work. And just like that, I knew. My life, my choices, were no longer my own. They belonged to this world now. Luca's empire was a web, and I had become a thread tangled within it. I spent my days learning, observing, and adapting to a world that was as unpredictable as it was dangerous. Each meeting, each new piece of information, felt like a small key turning in a lock, unlocking a door to something bigger. But with each door I opened, the stakes got higher. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. The more I worked with Luca, the more I realized how far-reaching his influence was. People bowed to him, respected him, and feared him, but there was a cost. Power came with a price, and that price was loyalty. Loyalty to the people who helped build the empire. Loyalty to the ones who had his back, no matter what. I had learned that quickly, but there were moments when I wondered if I truly understood what loyalty meant. I was starting to see things differently, things I wasn't sure I was ready to see. One evening, after a long day of reviewing documents, I was summoned to Luca's office. His tone was sharp, urgent. "Sophia, I need you here. Now." I walked into his office, feeling the familiar weight of uncertainty on my shoulders. Luca was standing by the window, staring out at the city below, his face hard and unreadable. "I need you to handle something for me," he said without turning around. "It's important." His words were simple, but I could sense the tension in the air. Something had changed. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Luca turned to face me, his eyes cold and calculating. "I need you to make sure we stay ahead of the game," he said. "There are people who think they can challenge us, threaten what we've built. I want you to find out who they are." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what he was asking me to do, but I had no choice. I had already given my word. "How do I do that?" I asked. Luca walked over to his desk, picking up a file and handing it to me. "This is what you'll need. Start with this." The file felt heavy in my hands, and I could feel the weight of the decision hanging over me. I opened it, scanning through the pages. It was filled with names, contacts, and details that I didn't fully understand. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, more to myself than to Luca. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. "That's what I like to hear. You're either with us, or you're not. And I need to know where you stand." His words felt like a final test, and I realized that I had no choice but to take the next step. There was no going back now. My loyalty had been tested, and now I would have to prove it. Luca was right about one thing. This was bigger than me. I was in too deep, and there was no way out. But a part of me didn't want to leave. I had already tasted the power, and I couldn't turn away. The world Luca had shown me was intoxicating, and I couldn't deny the pull it had on me. Whatever came next, I was ready. Or at least, I had to be. Luca's empire was becoming my reality. Each day, as I sifted through documents and met with his associates, I felt the weight of my choices. I had crossed a line, and every step forward only pulled me deeper into a world I wasn't sure I could leave. The file Luca had given me that day was like a blueprint to the underworld he controlled. The names, the details, it was all starting to make sense, but the more I uncovered, the more questions I had. It wasn't just about business or power, it was about survival. Survival in a world where loyalty meant everything, and betrayal meant the end. I knew I had to tread carefully. The weight of Luca's expectations was heavy on me. He had placed a lot of trust in me, and I couldn't afford to let him down. That night, after I had gone through the file and made my notes, I sat alone in my apartment, thinking about everything. The life I had built, the career I had worked so hard for, seemed so distant now. It was hard to remember what it felt like to have normal problems. Now, everything was tangled up with the Mafia. It was hard to even make sense of it anymore. My phone buzzed, breaking my thoughts. It was a message from Luca. "Meet me at the office in an hour," it read. I didn't hesitate. I knew what that meant. It was time for me to take the next step. I arrived at the office, and Luca was already there, waiting for me. His expression was unreadable, but I could tell there was something more to this meeting. "You've been doing well," he said, his voice steady. "But I need you to understand something. What you're doing now, it's not just about gathering information. It's about making sure that no one ever thinks they can challenge us." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The stakes are higher now, Sophia. People are watching us, waiting for us to slip. You need to be ready for whatever comes next. His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about numbers or even power. It was about protection. Protection of everything Luca had built and of everything that came with it. What's next? I asked, trying to steady my nerves. Luca looked at me with his piercing gaze, his eyes searching mine. You'll be meeting with a few of our allies. We need to strengthen our position, make sure no one thinks they can step on us. I nodded, feeling the tension in the air. There was no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. You'll be fine, Luca said, as if reading my thoughts. You've already proven yourself. His words were meant to comfort, but they only made the weight of the situation feel heavier. I knew I had no choice but to follow through, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all spiraling out of my control. I had joined Luca's world, but now it felt like the world was swallowing me whole. The deeper I went, the more I realized there was no way out. The loyalty Luca spoke of, it wasn't just a choice anymore. It was a commitment, and I had already made mine. Luca's world had become a maze, and I was slowly losing track of the paths. The deeper I went, the harder it was to distinguish between what was real and what I had been told to believe. Every decision, every move I made, was watched, calculated. I was no longer just an observer. I was a part of it, and I could feel it in every conversation, every glance exchanged in those quiet, tense meetings. But there were moments, small flashes of doubt, where I questioned my place in this empire. What had I become? My thoughts were interrupted when Luca called me into his office again. He was standing by the window, the city lights casting shadows across. His face. I could never fully read his expression, but tonight it felt different. There was something in his eyes, a weight, like he was about to tell me something important. You've been doing well, he began, his voice steady. But there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. But things are changing. There are forces at play, and I need you to understand that the stakes are higher now. My stomach tightened. I had learned to anticipate the weight of his words, but tonight felt different. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Luca turned to face me, his gaze unwavering. People are starting to get nervous. They see the way we've been growing, and they don't like it. I need you to stay sharp. There are going to be tests, people who will try to use you against me. The mention of tests sent a shiver down my spine. I had been pulled into this world by choice, but what Luca was describing now sounded like a world of threats and manipulation, where loyalty was the only currency. What kind of tests? I asked, my heart racing. Luca's expression softened, but there was still that underlying intensity in his eyes. I can't tell you everything yet, but you'll know when it happens. Just trust your instincts, Sophia. You've done well, and I'm counting on you. His words hung in the air, and despite the anxiety bubbling inside me, I nodded. I had to. The path I had walked had already been set for me. There was no turning back now. I left his office feeling the weight of his expectations on my shoulders. The night air was cold as I walked to my car, the city lights blurring in my vision. I had learned that there was always something more hidden beneath the surface, more at stake. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming next. But the thought of walking away seemed impossible. I had already become too entangled, and the ties that bound me to this world were tightening by the day. The game had changed, and I could feel the pressure building. Whatever came next, I was in it. And the only way out was through. Luca's world had become even more complex. I had crossed so many lines, each one blurring into the next, that I wasn't sure where the path began or where it would end. The more I worked for Luca, the more I saw the extent of his empire, his power, his reach, and the control he held over everything. I had been told once that loyalty was everything in this world, but now I understood it in a way that terrified me. I had made my choice, and now there was no turning back. The tests Luca had warned me about came quickly. They were subtle, like quiet whispers in a crowded room, but they were impossible to ignore. There were moments when I had to make decisions that would shape my future, decisions that involved trust, betrayal, and survival. The stakes were high, and I knew that any wrong move could cost me everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every glance, everything felt like a test now. I was constantly on edge, my mind working overtime to stay ahead of the game. One evening, after another long day, I sat in my apartment, the city lights reflecting off the windows, casting shadows that seemed to stretch for miles. I thought about everything that had led me to this point. My life had changed so drastically in such a short time. I had been given a choice to walk away, but I didn't. I had chosen this path, and now I was committed to it. There was no going back. Luca had said it best. There was no middle ground. You were either with him, or you were against him. And I had already chosen my side. The longer I stayed in this world, the more I realized how much I had to lose. But it also became clear that I wasn't the same person I had been when I first stepped into this life. I had changed. I had learned to navigate this dangerous world, to make decisions that weighed heavily on my conscience, but also on my future. There was no escaping it now. I had to embrace the choices I made and face the consequences of them. But through all of this, I learned something important. Sometimes, in order to succeed in a world full of chaos, you have to take control of your own destiny. You can't let others dictate your future. You have to find your own path, even if that means taking risks and making difficult choices. The story of my journey is a reminder that loyalty, trust, and the willingness to take chances are essential in navigating life's challenges. It's about understanding the consequences of your actions and being prepared for the future, no matter how uncertain it may seem. Take control of your own path, even when the world tries to steer you in another direction. Only then can you truly be free.